Hello, my name is Benji and welcome to Dice vs Cards. Today we're looking at Too Many Bones and we're finding out whether you can truly combine RPG elements and character progression with a board game like setting. Finally, and most importantly, we investigate why there are too many bones. Did they end up making us lopsided, or are we raging cannibals that simply cannot get rid of all the evidence? So let's see how this plays and whether this could be the next game for you. The object of the game is for you to cooperatively take up the deeds of one of these gear locks. So you'll need the relevant player mat, reference guide and dice that go along with them. Then you'll pick one of the big baddie bosses that hopefully, as long as you survive, you'll go up against at the end of your playthrough. This mat here represents where you're going to be battling the baddies. Before we get to how a turn plays out, we'll just roughly go through what a gearlock's mat looks like. So in this top left hand corner is its primary attributes. Health is as you'd expect, you take that much damage, you're knocked out from a battle. Dexterity is arguably your most important stat, because not only is it used for you to move on the battlefield, but it also caps the amount of dice you can use when it comes around to your turn. Attack is as you'd expect, doing damage to opponents, and defense is absorbing damage when taken. These here are the skill dice, and this is where the role playing and character progression comes in, because each gearlock has its own play style, and the more training points you get, the more dice you get access to. There are generally 4 trees for each gearlock, so you have to start at the bottom most times and then upgrade, gaining access to more and more powerful dice. Each turn is fairly straightforward in that you progress the day counter and read the narrative on the top encounter card. On the flip side of that encounter card are the choices you get to make on your turn. They're generally either combat or non-combat related, but either way you're going to be interacting with NPCs of some kind. So you'll follow the instructions on the card, and if it's non-combat related, take the relevant rewards or consequences that the card lays out. If you choose combat, however, it's time to refer to the battle mat, where you'll need your gearlock's chip and starting health pool. The game has an elegant way of setting up for battle in that the further you are progressed through the story and the more players there are, the more powerful the enemies you're going to come up against. So the baddies are taken from these piles here, and then the information on their face up side will show you where they're going to be deployed in the enemy zone. So this Manticore has been set up in one of the range slots, which means he's going to be sniping those gearlocks from afar. And the Direwolf Pup is set up in the appropriate lane in a melee slot. Each baddie has its own fixed initiative, but you roll for your gearlocks and then turn order is from highest to lowest. When it's the gearlock's turn, you're going to take a number of dice of your choice up to your dexterity value. So Tantrum here's rolled 3 attack dice and 1 skill dice. As Tantrum is a melee character, that means he can only do attack damage to orthogonally adjacent baddies. But the 5 attack damage here is more than enough to do lethal damage to the Direwolf Pup. Once skill dice are used, they're exhausted and generally can't be used again in the same battle. The active slots where this rage dice can be found will also often house defense dice. And so as you can imagine, these are passive slots or areas where dice can be used in response to a certain action. These lock slots here will house skill dice, and they're the only ones that can be transferred from battle to battle. And then here we have a row of backup plans. So anytime you roll a bone on one of your dice, they could be attack, defense or skill dice, you can start building up your backup plan. Just adds a little bit more flavor and gives some extra skills for your gearlock to use. When it's a melee baddie's turn, they'll move up to 2 spaces so that they're orthogonally adjacent to the closest gearlock. And ranged baddies like this Manticore here will just stay put throughout the battle. But once you've either killed all the baddies or all your gearlocks have been KO'd, you'll then take the rewards if you were successful or move on if you're unsuccessful. You can then either do one of these things. You can fully heal up your gearlock, you can scout what baddies are going to be coming next, or you can try and discard the loot cards you've got to try and get different ones. You rinse and repeat that process until you draw a Tyrant encounter card. And so long as you've got enough progress points, here Molmish needs 6, that you've gained from completing encounters, you can fight the big baddie at the end. If you're successful, then you and the other players win the game. However, if you're not, you can keep trying to kill him, but there is a hard turn limit. Here at the end of turn 9, you'll all lose as a team. So that's how this game plays. What did I think of it? So what's good about the game? Well, first things first, a disclaimer. The moment I saw the words Dice Builder RPG in that order and on a cardboard box, my salivation levels went into full dribble mode. That being said, who could possibly disagree what a great mechanical idea this is for a game? No one? Right, now we've got that out of the way, what I can say is that the execution of this most wondrous of ideas is by and large top drawer. The character progression elements, housed on a nice mouse mat type character sheet, show you the possibilities of what your character might become throughout a playthrough. I might personally have preferred a more swords and sorcery fantasy vibe to my characters than the more mechanical engineer type on display here, but I absolutely cannot fault the end result of this core tenet. The pacing of the progression and the way each character can at a push act as a standalone jack of all trades, but can contrastly be levelled up in a particular role for multiplayer, hits all the right notes. Secondly, the somewhat unorthodox combat arena used here on a 4x4 grid is shoehorned in because of the poker style chips, but it also works as a nice distillation and also representation of what an RPG combat session might look like. I don't mean precisely, of course, but I found myself happy that this wasn't a large board with cover and all sorts of space to traverse. You can still get your melee or ranged attack fix, and positioning is key, but it's delivered with a nice and compact footprint on the table. Finally, each of the 8 bosses that come in the core box hit more than they miss. There are variable difficulty and length games that you can choose from, and each requires something that little bit different to come away with the victory. And if you're playing multiplayer, you're really going to have to work well as a team, both in the arena and in developing your characters. So what's not so good about the game? Well, one of the weaker elements, and one that feels a little bit underwhelming, is the narrative. The mechanical process in between each combat feels somewhat underdeveloped, which means that if you're looking at this more for the storytelling aspects of an RPG rather than the character progression in combat, then you might be somewhat disappointed. It's a shame because I feel this element could have been fleshed out, given a bit more design time, and the non-combat elements could have been at least up there with the battles in terms of immersion and gameplay rewards. Finally, and I always preface this with the fact that it's subjective, but the artwork doesn't hit the right notes for me, and I don't think this is because I don't like the style, I just feel that much better choices could have been made in this area. And this goes deeper than that subjective layer as well, because there are some issues with the colour contrasts, and even the size of the text can leave a lot to be desired. But when all's said and done, I'm so glad that this game met so many of my expectations. It really is a marvellous creation, one that will most likely scratch your dice rolling and role playing itch. Be aware though, the cost of this game puts it in the deluxe category. The production quality is of a commensurate standard, but that will still be a drawback in some people's minds. So with all that being said, Dice vs Cards going to give a final score of 8.5 out of 10 to a dice building RPG. The selling point is its uniqueness, but also the execution of that idea. However, that's it from me. I'll see you next time. Too many broken bones in the world. There's too many bones can be broken into. Nailed it.